What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm one half of the podcast, Kevin Valentin.
And on the other half of the podcast, my name is Kyle Dabro. Kevin, we got a Thursday night game to go over. What do we got for this?
So, Kyle, we have the last two number one overall picks facing off on Thursday Night Football in Cincinnati. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 0-3, and the Cincinnati Bengals are surprising 2-1. Joe Burrow is having a pretty decent, if not a pretty solid comeback season after tearing his ACL last year. And Trevor Lawrence is, notably and visibly struggling like we all knew he would. It is a little difficult to play football with the lack of an offensive line and a lot of your weapons kind of falling off due to injury. So, Kyle, I'm just going to propose the question to you. Aside from who do we think will win and why, do you think that Trevor Lawrence is due up for a good game, and can it be done against the Cincinnati Bengals, and can they get their first win?
I'll tell you what, it's going to be tricky because what the Bengals were able to do last week against the Steelers was they were able to hold them down. Bengals only gave up 10 points to the Steelers last week. They made Ben Roethlisberger uncomfortable by getting constant pressure to him throughout the entire game. And by and large, the Bengals controlled that game from beginning to end. So when I look at the Jaguars are struggling to say the least. They're 0-3 right now. Trevor Lawrence has a very high tendency of turning the ball over, and his stats indicate that. He has 5 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. He has one of the highest turnover ratios as far as quarterbacks in the NFL currently. And you're going up against a defense that has been opportunistic. And look, I didn't think that the Bengals would be 2-1 this early in the season, but they've been quite a surprise to me so far, and it's large part due to the fact that Joe Burrow has been playing solid this year. He's getting a little bit more time in the pocket than he did last year, where he just got utterly destroyed because his offensive line couldn't protect him. And the numbers reflect that. He has 7 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. He's doing pretty good so far. He's not putting the ball in harm's way too many times, and his connection with his wideouts have been solid, especially Jamar Chase. That LSU connection has really been solid for them, and I imagine it's going to continue to grow as the season progresses. This is really kind of a good matchup of what could be some solid quarterbacks in the future in the NFL. But for this matchup, I'm going to side with Joe Burrow just because they've been the more consistent team so far. Defensively, the Bengals have been far better than what the Jaguars have been. And Kevin, I remember we were talking about this before we even started recording. Outside of Miles Jack, Malcolm Brown, and who was the third guy? Shaquille Griffin. There's not too many names that I could really tell you off the top of my head when it comes to the Jaguars defense. So I think when I look at this matchup, I think Joe Burrow is going to be able to have a solid game. I don't know if he's going to light it up against the Jags and throw like 4 or 5 touchdowns. I'm not saying that. But I could see Joe Burrow throwing for maybe 250, 275 yards, maybe throwing for 2, at the most 3 touchdowns. And I think the run game is going to be solid for them. I think they're going to focus on getting the ball to Joe Mixon, whether it's giving him 15 to 20 carries or targeting him maybe 5 to 6 or 7 times with Joe throwing the ball to him. So I think when I look at this matchup, I think the Bengals win this one fairly easily. I think they're going to win by 2 possessions, at most 14 points, but I think the safe number is going to be around maybe 10 points. I see the Bengals winning this one fairly easily.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. It is sad that we're seeing one of the more dominant college quarterbacks in recent history kind of fall to the level that he's playing at right now. Obviously we knew that Trevor going to Jacksonville was pretty much inevitable. The Jets won their second game of the season last year, and everybody was kind of praying for Trevor that he would maybe stay another year or boycott or demand a trade. But we all knew that wasn't going to happen. So it's like you said, Trevor's got to step his play up. But as I stated when the segment started, their offensive line is pretty bad. And it's comical because we were saying the same exact thing about Cincinnati last year. And Cincinnati didn't really make many improvements on their offensive line. I think that Zach Taylor has just adjusted their play calling and adjusted the system to where Joe's getting the ball out a lot quicker, or they're running a lot more protection scheme, whether that's an extra tight end or a running back blocking scheme as well. So overall, the main focus in Cincinnati is keeping their franchise quarterback up, alive, and in the game. And the acquisition, or should I say the drafting of Jamar Chase this past offseason in the draft was absolutely phenomenal. I do know that I was on record saying that they should have drafted an offensive lineman and not Jamar, and I do stand by that because that is going to pan out a lot better than another offensive weapon, just because I just feel like if your quarterback's upright versus in the ground throwing a touchdown to Jamar, you know what I mean? Like, I get it. He may have scored, but if the quarterback doesn't get up, is it well worth the points? Probably not. But again, I do definitely agree with Kyle's prediction. I do see that Cincinnati does win this game by 7 to 10 points. I say it's definitely a two-possession game. I just don't know by how much, whether that's a touchdown, or excuse me, whether that's 2 touchdowns or a touchdown and a field goal. We will see. But for Jacksonville to go out there and find a way to win, I think they're going to have to solidify the run game. I think James Robinson's going to need some consistent touches. I do know that he had 9 touches in week 1, I believe 20 touches in week 2, and then significantly less touches the week last week as well, just because I don't understand what it is with Urban Meyer. I don't understand if he's still in that college mindset. But in order to win in the NFL, you need to establish a run game so that you can develop the play action and so that Trevor can prosper and actually have time in the pocket to throw. So if Jacksonville has any chance of winning, I think James Robinson needs to have a big game, upwards of 125 to 150 yards on the ground, so that Trevor can maximize his time in that pocket and find those open receivers. They did go out and acquire Marvin Jones. They did go out there and re-sign Chenault, as well as who was that other receiver that? Oh my God,
They got Shark.
Oh, and Shark and DJ Shark, he did sign an extension as well. So it's not that Jacksonville doesn't have weapons. It's very similar to what Cincinnati had last year. You know, they have good pieces. They just don't have protection in order to keep the quarterback up. So unless James Robinson has that big game and Trevor cuts those turnovers completely to a null point or just one interception, I do not believe that Jacksonville has a chance. And like Kyle said, outside of that those 3 named players on the defensive side of the ball, Jacksonville does have a lot of no names. So I do expect Joe to carve it up. I would hope that he goes for about 300, 325, maybe 3 scores, hopefully no interceptions, and then Joe Mixon will have maybe 150 total yards, maybe about 75, 80 yards on the ground, 50 yards in the air. So we will see what happens, but definitely got Cincinnati winning this and moving on to 3-1.